Hello, everyone. Welcome to Prosperity Gate Talks, where visibility meets legacy. Today's guest is a living proof that leadership doesn't always mean walking away from the bedside. Sometimes it means going deeper, not just higher. I am joined by the phenomenal Sabrina Phillips, NHS Managing Director and coaching content creator. She hasn't just climbed the ladder, she's widened the path. She hasn't just shown up, she's lifted others as she rose. Sabrina's story has challenged and inspired me personally to keep rising too. And now she's launching something bold, the Nurse Launchpad, a new membership helping Band 5 and 6 nurses build confidence, clarity, and career elevation and everything that they deserve. I cannot wait for us to speak about this. She's going to unpack the mindset, the mission, and the movies behind this all. So if you've ever wondered and asked yourself, can I grow without leaving the bedside? This conversation is your answer. Sabrina, welcome to Prosperity Gate Talks, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Obedience. That's an amazing introduction.
So before we dive into your journey, could you just give us a brief introduction about yourself and share just a bit about your current role as an NHS Managing Director as well?
Hi, everybody. I am a mental health nurse by background, and I've been a mental health nurse from 2004. My Managing Director role is in the very senior management part of the NHS structure, so it surpasses the agenda for change. But previous to that, I was Band 9 nurse. And I guess just a bit about myself. I'm from the Caribbean. I was born and bred in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and came over when I was 19 years old. Did my training in the UK. Have always been really clear where I wanted to get to and with my career. The other bit of me is I'm a proud auntie, sister and daughter. And I absolutely love to travel because I think we work really hard and we must enjoy the hard work that we do. And what better way than to grow than traveling.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. Let's take it back to the beginning. What first drew you into nursing and how did you know mental health was actually your calling?
Well, that's a really good question, Obedience, because as I said, I came here from the Caribbean. So when I came, my first want to do anything was to be a lawyer. And then I realized really quickly, as I'm sure a lot of migrants do, that my family weren't going to be able to afford it. So I had to think of a plan B. And I was quite fortunate that when I moved here, I moved with the support of my aunt, who is also an amazing nurse. And she was general nurse, she was a health visitor, a midwife, and she was also into law. And she said, how about nursing? And I thought, oh, okay, I'll have a look. And I remember looking at the different types of nursing. And the reason why I chose mental health, there was two reasons. Where I'm from, we have, and I still think we still have, one mental health institution that they call the Red Roof. And it just intrigued me what happened there. But also with mental health nursing, there's a bit of the law with it. So although I wasn't able to follow my main passion or what I thought was my passion of becoming a lawyer, it gave me the opportunity to learn about the law. And the other bit was I didn't want to do general nursing because I didn't think I would do really well around blood. I like talking to people, although I'm an introvert, but I thought I'd do that quite well. So it was a no-brainer. And to be honest, it is the best decision I've made, like 20 plus years later. If I had to do it again, I would make the same choice. I think with mental health nursing, we have such a unique opportunity to be in people's lives when they're at their worse, but we can really support them to get to a better place or to journey on to that better place. Because reality is, for somebody with mental health issue, they may get better, they may not get cured, but as a nurse, you can walk alongside them in that journey and support them. So that's how I got into.
That is really, really interesting. Can you walk us through the key steps or moves that helped you rise from Band 5 to 9? I'm sure you've experienced the good, the bad, the ugly, but what made you keep rising anyway? What experiences, mindset shifts played the biggest role?
So when I was still in my training, so I did a diploma in nursing because back then that's what you did. So I trained in 2001. I think I was the last cohort of what was then known as the Project 2000 nursing. So it's essentially, we did a 3-year diploma course. The first year was looking at all parts of nursing. So we did acute, we did adult. So my adult placement was in an older adult ward. And I remember the matron then wanting me to convert over to mental health. I did a child placement, which was in a school. And then we had to do a learning disability. And then we went straight into our 2-year mental health. But I remember in my second year, I was really clear that initially I wanted to go into community, and I was told you can't go into community. So I started looking around for where I could do a job. And I saw that South London and Maudsley at the time had a 2-year rotation program, which not only was it 2 years and you had 3 different placements, but it also gave me the opportunity to top up to my degree. So I was always, and I remember it's either my second or third year, having a clear plan of where I wanted to get to in 5 years after qualifying. And at that time, we didn't have the agenda for change. We didn't have bandings. We had what was called the Whitley system. So when I qualified, I started as a D grade nurse. And then because I was fortunate enough to get onto the rotation program. So it was the only job I applied for. So I would suggest maybe not just to put your eggs in one basket, but have a clarity in terms of a clarity and a plan in terms of what you want to do. So I like thinking in 5 years, because it sort of makes you think about what the next role, where the role you need to get to in 5 years is, but the steps that you might want to get to around that. I've managed to get onto the rotation program, and what that gave me moving around, I think it really gave me a good solid foundation in wherever I'm working, thinking about how I improve the practice for not only the staff, but the care for patients. So we had to, in every rotation, do a bit of a project, whether it was look at where there might be a gap in practice and build on it. So I think in terms of mindset, or the shifts that have always guided my career, is how can I make the job that I'm doing better, but what is my next 2 or 3 steps? Because I think sometimes you can only see as far as you can, but you don't necessarily have to be the only person that's doing it, if that makes sense. I guess the mindset around that is, how do I improve what I do? How I improve myself, thinking about myself. So some of the other things I've done over the years is I have moved around a lot. To when I look through my career, I think I move every 18 to before my last 2 jobs, I was moving every 18 months to 24 months. And I guess part of that was taking the opportunities as they come, but being really clear that I was going to do a piece of work wherever I'm doing, and then moving on from it. And the other bit I've always done is build on my knowledge and skills. So with the rotation, I got my degree. Then after I went back into CAMS on my rotation placement, I worked in children and adolescent mental health ward. I did what was peripathetic rehabilitation. So that means working in people's homes, and also worked on a female acute ward. And that just gave me a really good grounding in terms of 3 different settings. I got my community bit in the end, because I worked in a peripathetic rehab in people's homes, but I also got exposed to working in a children and adolescent, which I didn't really get during my training. So when I went back to CAMS, I also did a CAMS course, which helped me to think about how we assess young people, but also think about things like attachment theory and different stages of a young person's life. So for me, there's something around wherever you go, if you don't have the knowledge or skills, it's doing the job, but then maybe looking at courses that can help build on it. But don't just rely on doing the courses. It's around when you're in that space doing something as well. And I remember back then we developed an induction package and a physical health clinic for the young people. So that is some of the key shifts I think that you need to make. So once I did my CAMS role, so then we had the agenda for change. So I was in band 5 then, which back then would have been the D&E grade. And I knew I wanted to go to a band 6 role. So I remember applying for lots of roles. I applied for community. I applied for site liaison as well. that's working in EDs at the forefront of mental health. I got some interviews and I didn't get the role, but I didn't let that stop me, because I think you can always learn from the no's. Always get feedback is what I say. If you watch any of my content, make sure you try and get some feedback on what you did wrong, what you need to improve, because every no is a learning opportunity. And I ended up going back to a place I thought I wouldn't go back to, which was female acute ward. But I think that really helped because there people knew me, people had trust in what I did. There is also where I got my first opportunity to go into a leadership role, because I remember being at an RCN conference trying to get students to apply to work with us, and the manager at the time saying, have you thought of doing this team leader role? And to be honest, then I was thinking, I don't want to be a manager. It looks like a rock and a hard place. But she said, have a think about it. And I remember her going off and me thinking, what's the worst that can happen? So when she came back, I said, yeah, I'll have a look. So she said there was this secondment opportunity coming up. So I went off to manage a female acute ward, and you'd notice it was a secondment, so it wasn't a permanent job. But I always say, take the opportunities where they come, whether it's a secondment, a fixed term. If I think about pivotal moments in my career, I think doing that job was one of those pivotal moments. And the reason I say this, I got introduced to two things. It was my first ward manager role, or first leadership role in any space that you would have. Being a band 7 in, whether it's in a community or inpatient ward, is going to be that first major step into management. But it's also where I got introduced to quality improvement, and I absolutely love quality improvement. So at the time we're doing productive wards, and I really worked with our QI facilitator to improve what we're trying to do, which was release time for people to care. So we did things like review the ward rounds, make sure there was activities on the ward, looking at things like our violence and aggression, but not just doing it as a team, including the patients as well. And what that then led to is an opportunity came up for a quality improvement facilitator role, which again, it was a 7. It was the same banding that I was in, but in between that I had to go back to my old role because it was a secondment. So I went back as a band 6. But I think within 3 to 6 months of being the band 6, that opportunity came up. So again, when I applied for this quality improvement facilitator role, it was a fixed term role. It wasn't permanent. But what I knew, and speaking to colleagues, was that their contracts kept getting extended at the end of the year. But also because we were permanent within the trust I was in, it meant that when you read the policy, if they didn't have any money, they would have to redeploy me. So in a way, it was, I would still have a job at the end of it. But again, that gave me the opportunity to then lead on a trust-wide project around reducing length of stay for patients. And I worked with an inpatient ward and a community ward. And it did 2 things for my career. So I had a big project that was trust-wide that was able to show impact because we're able to reduce the length of stay for the community teams. But more importantly, the work we did on the inpatient ward formed the basis of the trust violence reduction strategy, which was called 4 Steps to Safety. And the other thing it did at the time, we were testing out introducing the friends and family test for the trust. And now the friends and family test is everywhere. And because I did that role, I was able to then step into other roles because I could show I could work across the organization. I had something to talk about in my interviews in terms of the impact that I did. I absolutely love QI. So I got training in QI. I got a lean green belt. I got the opportunity to go away to Scotland and Florida to present on the work that we did in QI. And I always, in every role that I do, think about how we can improve it. And I'm always thinking about that quality improvement methodology in the background, and always saying to people, that's a good idea, go off and test it, come back and tell me how it's as opposed to saying no, go let people go and learn and test it. Moving on from that role, I did like an education and training, learning and practice leading role, which again, I went off and did a training course, obedience. So I've got a training qualification as well because of the role that I did, because one of the things in that role I had to do was like training analysis, and I could do stuff, but I didn't have that knowledge. So I was able to get get that training in. But also I got opportunities to work with our simulation training team in the organisation, and developed training around assessment courses for nurses, but for admin staff. And also we did some work around the family triangle, so how we work with families. And off the back of that, those courses won a grant to roll it across South East London Trust. The other one, the psychiatrist that we worked with, he won a Royal College Psychiatry award of the family course that we did. And I think some of the stuff that we've done is either still running in the training. One of my main passions in doing all this, I think for me, is how I support staff. And so back then, I really wanted to be a chief nurse, or it's a chief nurse or a director of nursing. So I then started choosing roles that would get me there. So I did a head of pathway role, which is more operational, but I worked really closely with my clinical colleagues. And then during that role, during that time, the opportunity to do a secondment, and it was a 3-month secondment as a head of nursing came up. So I did that. And then again, during that time, because the NHS changes so rapidly, we were moving from what was service lines back into borough-based. So there was opportunities for 4 heads of nursing across the organisation. And talk about losses. So I remember applying for one particular head of nursing role for at least 3 times. And the first time, and you know, hindsight's a beautiful thing. Maybe at the time I wasn't ready, but when I was in it, I didn't feel like I wasn't ready. So getting that first no was a massive blow. And I've always said, I think it's the first time in my NHS career I sort of question whether I didn't get the role because of the colour of my skin. And part of that is because there was other colleague who had gone for the role and hadn't got it as well. So some of it might be, it's my own perception of what happened, but it didn't stop me from not continuing to apply for it. And the irony is I applied for secondment or acting up, same role, and got that role, to the point where like it really knocked my confidence, but I kept going. I just did what I needed to do in the role, because sometimes you get no's and you can, and this is the thing, is you can then behave really badly. You can, because, you know, when you're upset, and it's still upsetting now thinking and talking about it. But the thing I can control is my own behaviour. I can't control other people's. What I want when people think about me, how I am in a space. I'm pleased to say I then got that role eventually, because I think I got to a point where I was like, I'm going to go for it this one last time. And if I don't get it, fine. You know, I'm happy where I am. But I did get the head of nursing role, and I did do it, I think, for maybe 18 months as well. And it was in that space, because at the time, and a lot of the way the NHS is set up now, if you think about leadership triangles, you've got a nurse, a doctor, and an operational lead. So in that space, I worked with the service director and the medical director to sort of set the strategy and direction for the service. I'm really pleased to say that I was able to introduce Band 5 nurses into community, working with colleagues, because for me, I thought, you know, we're missing a trick in terms of how we support our nurses to start off. But also, I was able to increase my nursing support. So I had about 2 matrons to begin with. I managed to increase that to, I think, 3. And got one to cover our community teams as well. Because for colleagues that are listening, I think sometimes in nursing, we could be quite impatient focused. Mm-hmm. And part of that is that's where a lot of the risk is held, isn't it? You know, if you're going to get a serious incident, it's going to be in an inpatient unit. So I get that, but we can't forget that most of the people we look after is in our community teams, and they too hold a lot of risk. So it was during that head of nursing role, I thought, I really want to have impact. And if you're going to have impact, you need to be at the top of the tree. And in my head, the top of the tree at that time was being a service director. But to do that, I thought I needed a bit more ops in what I do, so operational management in what I did. So again, I remember speaking to my service director, who was brilliant, and saying, this is what I'd like to do. And she said, okay, leave it with me. And that's another thing, is we need to be sharing our goals with people, but with people who can support us and who's got our back. Because then she was able to, in her network, speak to another colleague that I'd worked with, who then had a role coming up in what was the Lambeth Alliance. So that's where I was the band 9. And I went in as, again, it was a fixed term role for 9 months. And I went in as a program director at the start of 2020. And everybody knows at the start of 2020, that was COVID. So I started in January, and come March, sadly, we had the COVID pandemic, and my director at the time had to go back into the organisation as a deputy coup, which meant his role came up as an opportunity. And I think back then, I still didn't have a lot of confidence in what I was doing. So I remember saying to him, oh, I'm going to apply for your role, but I'm just going to do it to get a professional development plan type thing. And like I say, and I'm just think sometimes we need to really be confident in what we bring to the table and the skills and knowledge that we have. So I did go for the role, and lo and behold, I got the Alliance Director role. Initially, it was a secondment, and it was supposed to be, I think, for 6 months, and it rolled into maybe a year and a bit. And then I was recruited into it permanently, which was amazing. I mean, that's one of the jobs I really, really absolutely loved, because not only was it an operational role, but I worked alongside not only clinical colleagues, but people from our voluntary care sector organisation. And one of my main thing I'm really proud of is I was able to work with a local community group called Black Thrive, and we developed a culturally appropriate peer support and advocacy service, which was essentially based around having people from a Black background with experience of mental health working into our wards and supporting patients on the wards to get the advocacy that they need. And we won a Health Service Journal Award for that piece of work. And then whilst doing that alliance role in the trust I was in at the time, the chief operating officer left. And so there was an opportunity to apply for that role. So I applied, because why not? I mean, what's the worst that can happen? I say that a lot because people can either say yes or no. And if they say no, I'll ask why. And I'll find out the why and then try to build on it. So that was, again, another pivotal moment, because although I didn't get shortlisted, what I did get was conversation with the chief people officer, who explained why I wasn't shortlisted. But she then was a coach and a mentor for me to say, if this is where you want to get to, what are some of the things you need to do to get to that? And, you know, a chief operating officer role is massive. You're looking after the whole trust. It's not just the finance, it's making sure you've got the resources there, it's ensuring you've got the estates. So it would have been a massive step up in terms of what I'd done before. So we talked about things I needed to do, and there was some stuff like doing a winter plan, getting a bit more involved in things like beds. And then in that conversation, she did say to me, there's an opportunity coming up for an acting role as deputy coup. And again, it was for a short period of time. So again, I applied for it. And it was supposed to be 2 months, because it was a bridging while the new coup was coming in. So I did that role. So I was then in charge of doing the winter plan and then beds for the trust. And anybody on this call know beds is quite a challenge, isn't it? It was whilst doing this acting role that the opportunity for the role that I now sit in came up, because I had to liaise with a colleague from the trust I'm in about a bed. And I just messaged to go, really sorry, we don't have a bed, we're working on it, you know. And then she messaged back to go, Sabrina, how are you doing? By the way, we've got this role coming up, have a look. And I wasn't looking for a new role, obedience and colleagues. I was really comfortable where I was. And I always think that's a good place to be in, where an opportunity comes up that you're not feeling, I really don't like the role that I'm in, I'm just going to take anything that comes. It has to be the right opportunity. So I had a look at the job description, and it looked like, there's some stretching bits in here, because But most of it I can do. And then I did my due diligence, which I tell a lot of people. So I got speaking to everybody. I spoke to the chief nurse. I spoke to the medical director. I spoke to the COO. I spoke to the person that was in the role. And she gave me so much information on what it entails, the day to day. I read the board papers, knew what their trust strategy was, knew what their trust values was, and also got coaching because going for this role, and like I said, I was in a band 9 role, and this managing director role is badged as a very senior manager. So it's outside the agenda for change, and it's in the same realm as your chief nurses, your medical directors are. So it's not a board position, but I feed into the chief operating officer. For me, it was really important to get coaching, and it's specific coaching about the interview techniques I needed to do to get that. So I had a few sessions with my coach, Barry, who is amazing, absolutely amazing. And so, so went for the role and obviously got it. I'm in it. I must say, my day to day. So as a managing director, I cover 4 boroughs. So the 4 boroughs are 2 inner London boroughs and 2 outer London boroughs. And I am in charge of everything. I work alongside, I've got a medical director, an MD, and I've got a director of nursing, and we form that triumvirate I talk about. So I take on all the operational bits of finances, sit with me. The strategy for the division sits with me, and to be honest, the buck stops here. We work together, but if there's any questions about things that we're not doing, it does come to me, and I work with my colleagues around that. So what does a day in the life of an MD looks like? So today Obedience and I are speaking on a Sunday, and at 11 o'clock I will dial in every Sunday on our bed call, just to ensure, one, that we've got enough beds for the patients that are waiting in our emergency departments or in our other areas such as place of safety, other med beds, and understand what the demand and capacity will be for the week. So I attend a bed meeting every day because that is one big part of my role. So I've got most of the mental health beds. We've got other services, so community services, and we're preparing for CQC visits. So again, it's attending meetings where we're talking about different areas of the key lines of inquiry. So CQC wants to make sure that you're safe, that it's caring, that it's well led. So each week we'll go through area with the team, set some directions, and ask them to feed that in. I've got a monthly divisional board that, again, we have 3 components to it. So there's a quality component, there's a business and transformational component, and more importantly, there's the finance bit. So again, it's working with my PA and my medical director and chief nurse to ensure that we've got the right papers in and that we're having the right discussions and the right actions. We review our risk log there every month to make sure that we're mitigating against any risk that's there. I'm in charge of all the complaints that come through. So we share out the quality stuff. So any complaints that come through, I sign off. So there's some that will get a local sign off, but if it is to the degree and level that it needs a managing director sign off, I will go through it. And when I go through complaints, I want to see that we're learning and that we're putting things in place that these things don't happen again. So I do send some stuff back and go, what have we done here? But also for me, the bugbear I have is when we take a long time to respond to complaints, because at the end of that bit of paper is somebody that we haven't, in their view, we haven't done something right about, and they're waiting for a response, and we need to do it in a timely manner. I've got specialist services, so things like talking therapies, and I work with my chief psychologist to think about how we make sure we've got the right demand capacity, the resources around that. A big part of my role, as I said before, is finances, and at the moment the NHS is in a really interesting place in that the money we have to make sure that it works. But we also know, and I say this, that sometimes we're not spending our money in the right way. So we need to have cost improvement plans to ensure that we are using the money that we get in the right way for patient care. So a lot of that is the focus for me and colleagues going forward. There's other things I do, but that is in a nutshell what my job is. And every day you go in with a plan or an idea of what you want to do, but there's always other competing priorities. And I think one of the key things, and it's an everyday learning, is how I delegate, how I you and I don't want to say use, but I've got amazing borough directors and other colleagues who can support me in the work I do. So it's thinking about, who can I ask to do this? What do I need to ask them not to do? Do I need to be in this meeting? Who else can be that? So that is a shortened version of how I've got here, some of the things I take on board in terms of how I operate. And lastly, the other thing I'd say that I think is very important as we're all nurses is I reflect on my practice. Every day is a learning day for me. I get things wrong. And when I do, I put my hands up and say, I've got this wrong. How can we? And I think that's an important trait to have, because then people trust you. They're willing to come alongside you, but also they then give you feedback that helps you to build on what you want to do.
But the journey didn't end there. Stay tuned for part 2, where Sabrina opens up about burnout, bold moves, and the mindset that helped her rise beyond Band 9.